Well, good afternoon and welcome to yet another one of the Way Forward podcasts. We are absolutely thrilled and lucky today to have General, that's a four-star General, Paul Funk, who you recently retired from the prestigious Training and Doctrine Command. He has a storied history in Iraq and Afghanistan, soldier from beginning to end, military brat. So he's been doing this for a long time, and we're very honored to have him today. Sir, it's good to see you. Anything you'd like to tell the audience before we begin?
Absolutely, Chris, and thanks for having me. And for those of you that took that long-winded introduction, my name's Funk, and I'm an American soldier for 42 years. I got the privilege to wear the jersey of the greatest country on earth.
So look, we both have had leaders who have told us, when you're in charge, you can never be wrong. You have to be perfect. You never let
Yeah,
your guard down.
yeah,
Don't expose any weaknesses to those.
yeah,
And I've always thought those guys were, quite frankly, bad leaders. Uh,
yes.
but you're a statistical anomaly in my experience. So how did you get to that level of self-confidence and self
Well, I felt like if you took care of your people would take care of you, Chris. That's not just a saying; it's true. And so if
yeah.
you invest in them, and I always tell people you got to share the suck, right?
Yeah.
That's what it is. I mean, it's easy to be the guy out there, running down here at Fort Hood. We had Battalion Avenue, right? When it's 70 degrees and it's nice and you know everything's going well and you're looking good out there running on there. But when the chips are down, when you're on a cold, lonely post somewhere and it's raining sideways, it's just miserable. That's when the leader's got to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can remember we did a gunnery when I was a squadron commander, and in Texas, which is almost impossible. It seemed like it rained for a month. I'm not kidding you. Every time we had an engagement, I was these young lieutenants were learning. They were running. We were running platoon gunnery, and so and it'd be raining sideways. I had to get up in the hatch of that Bradley as the squadron commander and take it just like they did, right? I
Yeah.
mean, because that's what it meant to share the suck, to experience things when they're at your worst, because the good times will they just make it even broader. By the way, the guy mentorship matters. I
Yeah.
learned that from obviously watching my dad and my father-in-law grow as I grew up, but my mentors happen to be very, very good guys like Marty Dempsey, uh, for that matter, the Big O, General Odierno.
Yeah.
Those were my guys, right? They were my mentors. And then along the way, I had really good friends. The peer-to-peer mentorship piece was important to me. It was important for me to have a relationship outside of just the Army with the guys I was serving with
Yeah.
and their families.
Well, of course, the audience is going, well, that's real easy to say when you're a
Yeah,
general. But I think what they have to remember is you weren't always a general. So,
that's right. I mean,
so because
yeah,
I can't imagine, so you've got all these great mentors, your dad's in the military.
yeah,
You probably about the time you began to realize where he was at, he was probably a pretty senior guy then. And,
yes,
and I'm sure that he had all these kinds of cool guys around, burning burgers and hearing
yep,
war stories and getting to
yes,
meet these cool guys. And
yeah.
then here you are, you go to school, you become an officer, you walk in a second lieutenant Funk, and then you walk in there and it's not always those kinds of guys. How did you deal
Exactly.
with that? What was it that was, how frustrating and what kinds of mentoring up did you have to do? Or did
Well,
you do it?
you learn a lot. Actually, I did when I got to be a captain. When I was a lieutenant, it was my friends, right? No kidding. My two best friends as a lieutenant are still my two best friends now. They both got out of the Army. One is both as captains. One is the just retired as the chairman of Tokyo Electron, and we still talk every day. And the other one is the senior executive at Olympus Cameras, and those two guys are still my golf buddies, and still. So we back in that day, it was us lieutenants, right? The lieutenant mafia. You remember this, and
Yeah.
we relied on each other, and it was
Yeah.
us against the captains, and the captains against the majors and field grades, right? And we did that kind of stuff. And my unit, we were that kind of tight. We spent ungodly amounts of time in the field. I mean, 200 and some odd days.
Yeah.
Because that's when the training centers just started. And you went out there, and you trained and all this business, and you got all the prep, and you did that because you couldn't fail. And my God, we were in the field forever. Well, but we stayed out of trouble that way too.
So when you were going through that, so Carol DeWick has this new book. Yeah, it's not new; it's newish, where she's talking about a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. Do you think those experiences, were formative to you in terms of? Because I remember the big sign. What's his name? Wes Clark was my brigade commander, and he had this big on the side of the building. It said, more sweat and training, less blood and combat kind of thing. And, as a young lieutenant on staff duty, you're staring at that going, I wonder what the heck he means, because nobody explains stuff to you, but it suddenly becomes intuitive. But, when we were growing up in those areas at the combat training centers, we were just getting beat, just slaughtered.
Absolutely.
And nobody was getting fired. And that's where I think I went, wait a minute, what are they doing to us? They're putting us in these situations where we just cannot win. But what I realized, I walked away and went, I'm not doing that next time. And I might try.
Yes, that's right.
So we were forced into having a growth mindset.
Yes, absolutely. Experiential learning. The human reformer learns two ways, right? Significant emotional experience or repetition. And so we got the opportunity to do both at those training centers and to play before that, right? And I do believe we built into ourselves the fabric of being able to look at ourselves critically, and share the experience and not take it personally, because we were all getting better together. I think that's incredibly important.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing I see. And you've been out here now for a bit, but not as long as me. So
right. Yeah.
What I see is for maybe our audience and for CEOs and developing managers is everything has to be successful. And I get that in the business world, you don't want to take a lot of risk and hurt the bottom line. But at the same time, underwriting risk is nothing that they've ever heard before, where a leader is going to protect them if they try something and it doesn't work. And then they don't understand how to conduct an after action review to sit down and critically look at it without it being personal, like you just said, and then grow from the experience, update the policy, change the procedure, add people, push people to another thing that's more of a priority. That natural thing doesn't happen in most businesses that I talk to. It's just, we keep going up, but we're only worried about success. We're not worried about growth.
Right. I think, Chris, I think the Army in particular takes on the DOTLM PF, doctrine, organization, training, material, and personnel and facilities. I think they take that on in a very good fashion. I think the single most important thing that happened, for example, in the revolution that was happening as you and I came in the Army, was the advent of the training centers. And then from there was the after action review process. That process itself made us the Army that took down the fourth largest army in the world in 100 hours. Frankly, that was what made us the best army in the world, was that kind of a mindset. In all of the, we had the doctrine, right? We went from active defense to 3.0 and into, the air land battle. We went from organizationally, we came back to the combat teams, but we fought as divisions, right? And we had a program for that. And then we took on the training centers to include what was then called the Battle Command Training Center. If you remember, that started, generals didn't look at themselves very critically until that program came along. Right? Everybody thought the emperor had no clothes and all that business. And I believe that process, that after action, in my opinion, allowed me to be allowed me to formulate in my commands a learning environment, because I was raised on that kind of a process
Yeah.
where you make your mistakes in training. If and as long as it's not, illegal, immoral, or unethical, you then can apply the lessons you learn for the next time.
Yeah, and when it's what's interesting, I've been trying to articulate that to the private sector, and
Yeah.
I think as you and I saw that continuum, the things that dropped out of that,
Yes.
the golden nuggets that dropped out, which
Yeah.
was learning through failure, and
Yes.
but putting people in an environment to intentionally fail where it doesn't impact on the bottom line is critical. We call that training. Others might call that, an offside or something to do something where people begin to trust. Okay, they don't want me to just do this playbook. They want me to think.
Yes.
It's the how to think versus what to think. So that was
What exactly?
trust dropped
Yes.
out of it. How to
Yes.
and then the how to think included the after action review.
Yeah, and then if you think about what Dempsey brought in when he was the TRADOC commander, and that was the process of mission command, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Which was the basis, in my opinion, the basis of success, right? Because you give somebody left and right limits, you tell them what you're looking to get done, and those that were smart enough to do the boss's work first,
Yeah.
so that bought them the time to do the things that they wanted to do, those were the ones that succeeded, in my opinion.
Well, it was to me it was the word intent.
Yes.
When somebody said intent, I went, okay, what's that mean? Because
Yes.
somebody would say, go blow up the radio station. Okay. And I would
Okay.
go there and I would obliterate the radio station. They would go, nah, that's not what I wanted. So what did you want? I wanted not blow up the radio station. I want you to blow up the radio tower. And
Yeah.
if the intent was to make it fall on the radio station so the whole radio station doesn't work, then you got to give me the why. It's
Yeah.
the
That's
why
right.
aspect of
Yeah.
it. And
And
that's what Dempsey did.
yeah, and frankly, I think that this generation, if you want to leap forward now, as I've seen it, watched it, read a couple of books, one of the great books on this generation is called Zeconomy by a guy named Jason Dorsey
Okay.
and his wife. They are brilliant at describing what this generation is going to do for the economy, for service to the nation, you name it, because they've done the research, right? And so they'll tell you they want to know the why.
Yes.
They absolutely want to know why, and then frankly, if it doesn't fit, if your organization doesn't fit their why,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
not going to join.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We saw that
Yeah.
cadet command
Yeah.
when I got
Yeah.
there was that the Z's coming in. They have
Yes.
to have a sense of purpose. There has to be
Yes.
something of value in
Yeah.
the outcome, and money is not the motivator.
It's not.
It's the intrinsic piece of it that's important to them. But yeah,
Yes.
the intent and always starting with why and all that stuff.
Yeah. That's
That's
right.
why as mission command evolved, it went down to understand. And to me,
Correct.
that made perfect sense. Was
Yes.
how can you give somebody something to do if they don't understand why they're doing it?
Yeah. And then you have, OODA loops and all those business too, right? So and then you have decide, detect, deliver, and assess,
Yeah.
right? I mean, those things matter.
Yeah.
And you can do those in business too. I
Yeah.
think people are a little bit afraid, like you were saying about whether or not they feel like they're going to fail.
Well,
What I see the absence of training onboarding and training as the two biggest problems for larger organizations that I deal with and work with.
well, the number one thing you have to fight through with companies when you're advising them is they say yes, they acknowledge this is
Yeah.
stuff I have to do it, but I
Yeah.
don't have time. I'm not
Yes.
like the Army where I have a large enough workforce I can take some
Right.
offline.
Exactly.
And when we go through it with them, we slowly chip away at that time thing to give them time to do it. It's exponential, the impact of positivity.
Yes.
It's almost like a 1 to 10. If you
Yes.
give them 1 hour of training, it's worth 10 hours. It's 10 more hours added back to efficiency and
Yep.
productivity in your organization, especially to include the mental aspect of the trust that is built. Because you said it twice, you said investing in people.
Yep.
Investing in people is huge, especially
Yes.
I was talking to my daughter-in-law yesterday, and her poor sister is in a company that has an annual period where they fire people. And so
Yeah.
they spend the whole year
I
waiting
know.
and maneuvering and probably not doing,
Yeah.
probably doing some nefarious activity to make themselves look
Yeah.
better than another person. And then we're still going to fire 25% of our workforce between February and May. And it's like,
Yeah.
and then hire new workforce and then
Yeah.
do it again. What kind of, nobody wants to work there.
No, I
I
agree.
wouldn't think.
I think culture and really where you have a trusting culture that, and by trust it's not blind trust, right? You trust,
Right.
you train through, walking around, looking at, making adjustments, making, you do those things. um but I find that those that have great culture where they can interchange between the worker and the work and the foreman or whatever you want to be, where there's interchange and then agreement, you have much more productivity, in my
Oh yeah.
opinion.
Yeah. I teach groups, to start with why and go to the lowest level and not just give the why, but demand the why. And
Yeah.
if you get your lowest employees comfortable with asking why to their mid-level managers, which, as you know, like our sergeants, they don't like that when you go down and get all the privates and movie theater and say,
No.
I want you to always ask why. If
Yeah.
they can't explain it, don't do it, and then blame it on me. But
That's right.
that's a organizational cultural thing.
Yeah.
And then the next thing you know, when the chips are down and everything is just absolutely chaotic, and you come in and go, do this,
Yeah.
trust is there. They're like, oh my,
Yes,
this must be as important as it looks because he's not telling me why.
that's
It's
exactly right.
if you get the reverse of what the world is, I wish he would tell me why, because I'm not going to get very excited about it because he never tells us
Right.
why. And it
And
normally
most of the,
why.
you're so right about that, Chris. One of the great organizations I found is a place called Mission Barbecue. You ever eaten there?
No.
They are wonderful. That company is magnificent. It's mostly on the East Coast, but Mission Barbecue has a tenant um, for their employees. Every one of them has to be able to tell the boss, "What's your why?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your why?" And frankly, I talked to the boss, who's a great guy. He's got 3 kids that serve, just a dynamite fella. And I asked him, I said, why'd you do that? And he says, because I want to know why these people are embedded. Why are they invested in us? And it's fascinating to listen to them. And anytime they'll come to, and I've been to a lot of events that Mission Barbecue sponsors, where they come up and say, then tell you what their why is. And I mean, many of them will move you to tears. It's
Yeah.
been fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's those kinds of things and those kinds of organizations that I believe are much more successful in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're successful to the client. I mean, when the client,
Yes.
I mean, that's the other thing I think is interesting is, when you get to be our age and I'll walk in, I can just walk into a headquarters or a building and you can feel the organizational tone,
Yes.
behavior. And then
Agreed.
there's so many things that you can see because you and we've probably walked in, I don't know, hundreds, if not thousands of colonels' offices, and we've had enough of those that you can go, oh wow, this guy's struggling, or this
Yeah.
gal's got a toxic problem.
Yeah.
And I have CEOs go, you can't do that by well, so yeah, I can. I
Yeah,
said,
you can.
you have a serious problem delegating responsibility because you're the smartest person in the organization. They go, why would you think that? I said, well, your entire conference table is full of projects. So what's happening is people are coming in. You never told them exactly what you want because you don't know. You're the I'll know it when I see it kind of guy.
Yeah.
And then you get frustrated and you go, screw it, I'll do it myself. And you take it away from them because you don't take time to understand, visualize, and describe what
Right.
you're doing because you're just throwing taskings out and you're not explaining the why. You're not giving them the
Exactly.
parameters and you're not having them come back and forth and staying involved. You send them off on a wild goose chase and I think it's a zebra, but it could be a horse or a giraffe, but I don't know for sure. And
Yeah.
3 months later, they come back with an elephant. And you go, that's not what I wanted.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that's so common.
Yes.
It hurts to see.
Yeah.
because they can't see it themselves. Because unlike you and me, you relied on your peers when you were younger.
Yep.
I'm sure you did, your whole career you relied on your peers. But and even though we thought it was lonely, the can you imagine if you're the CEO of the company for
Oh
35
yeah.
years, who are your peers? How do they, what kinds of things would you offer to them to think about in terms of how do you get mentors? I mean, if you don't have anybody above you, and if it's competitive left and right, are there
Yeah.
other ways to get mentors in your experience?
I look at a lot of the times I look at the sports organizations. If you look at where the world class, you name them, like quarterbacks and things like. If you notice, they all have performance coaches. They all have someone that they rely on to see things they don't see.
Right.
Many of us in the military use our chaplains as being those seeing eyes out there when you're looking for things that involve empathy.
Right.
So what I try to tell people is um, find that person that you can call no matter what happened and no matter what the problem is, and they'll at least listen to you. And then they don't even maybe give you advice. At least they'll listen.
Yeah.
So if you're a CEO of a company, um, and you're losing market share or something of that nature, and you don't have anybody to talk to, that's a problem. You have to start this process before you get to the top there. You just
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, the idea that there's symmetrical mentors, which are kind of they make
Yes.
logical sense. Somebody who's your
Yeah.
boss or somebody who's in,
Right.
but it's the asymmetrical mentors that
Yeah.
people don't ever tell you about. And I think and of course, like I'm with you. Chaplain was a good one. If you're a civilian,
Yes.
it might be your minister, it might
Yes.
be your friend from
Mhm.
high school, of
Yeah.
all different varieties to get a different perspective of the world. But I think the key thing you said though is you got to go find them yourself.
You do. You can't get
Yeah,
them appointed and any of that
yeah.
stuff. And
They're
then
not knocking at your door.
no, they're not. And mine happens to be pretty close. And I had lunch with him yesterday. And by the way, it's a couple. He and
Yeah.
his wife are just great friends of ours, but more importantly, they're mentors because they're about 10 years separating us, and it's fascinating to watch. I mean, and I now mentor their son.
Yeah.
It's a neat
Yeah.
relationship.
I think people shy away from because they don't think somebody will accept them. And what I've also learned, I have a son-in-law who I encouraged him to go find a
Yeah,
mentor in his company. And when he asked him, the guy didn't even know what that meant. And so
I
it's not as common.
it's
And
it's a bit of a foreign concept, frankly.
yeah, it's like, well, where do I read about it? What do I do? And so
Yeah, that's
finding
right.
books on that are important. Hey, boss, when you said when you were younger, okay, and
Yeah.
I am absolutely positive you did something like this. If you didn't, then I would like to know why. But I am sure I didn't hear the word reverse mentorship actually used as a term until probably, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. But I noticed when somebody said it to me, it's like, yeah, I've done that because of probably better self-awareness than the leader I was working for. To at least describe to that leader, hey, here's what kind of makes me tick and motivates me. And I'm either not getting that from you or I'd like to get more from you. I'm sure you've done this.
You
Tell
mean
us
lead
about
up? You're
yeah,
talking about leading up. Yeah,
leading up.
frankly, you have to do that, right? And the higher up the flagpole you go, the more you have to do that, right?
Yes.
And you have to be a bit of an optimist. You also have to be a bit of a pragmatist um, as you do those things, right? One of the things I found when I had, especially the higher I started to go up, and when we were in combat situations, you worked for the guy you were assigned to, right?
You may have never met him before.
Right, which was the case in a couple of these things. And what I found was, I would say, okay, here's what my objectives of this organization are, or this what we're trying to get done on this mission. What do you think? And then we would come back collectively, right? And you really tried to use the processes that we had, right? So the quarterly training briefs, the after action review, the but what I found, the written word was much more important. The higher up I went, to put on paper what I was trying to get done. When
Yeah.
you're leading a 72 nation coalition, and you have all these various governments and all of their national interests involved, and you have an ambassador, and you have a commander, a central command commander, and you have subordinates from multiple different directions. You got to articulate what makes you tick, like you said. And so mine was always very simple. You know, I actually used training, maintaining morale, discipline, and teamwork as my pillars wherever I went, and I applied them to whatever the mission was. So people got used to talking to me in those terms.
Right.
And I always tried to use a campaign plan mentality, and I tied my times that I wanted the information, especially from subordinates, and then worked with my higher headquarters to say, this is when I'm going to provide you that information.
Yeah.
Does that work for you? And in one case, it will work very well. In another case, it didn't work as well, but it still worked, right? We adapted to it. One way, it was instantaneous. We saw eye to eye, and it worked magnificently. And the other way was, it was more of a process, and it took longer, and there was building trust and working back and forth and shared experiences, and it took a longer time.
So all the things you described, processes,
Yep.
cognitive preferences,
Yep.
your biorhythm of when you like to get
Yes.
information, when you
Yeah.
did. Tell me about your personality kinds of things you had to let your boss know. Did you ever have to
Well,
sit down and say,
frankly, I'm pretty. I am. I take constructive criticism pretty well on myself,
right,
not necessarily on my organization. I'm very, if you're on
protect?
my team, you're on my team, right? And I'm going to fight for you left and right, up and down, and it doesn't matter. And once we've collectively decided this is the direction we're going to go, I'm going to fight to keep pushing us that way,
Right.
right? So I was very protective of my organizations, always. But on myself, I could take criticism better if it was point to point.
Right.
If it was in a public situation, I was not that good at. I'll just be frank about that. Which
Well,
I learned, which caused me to learn some things to remember that when I got to be a Corps commander and a CJTF commander. You can't, those guys have egos just like you do. You got to be careful, and guys and gals have egos. So when we're learning together, you got to make it more of, this is what I thought. What do you think? As opposed to, you dork this up. I found that to be much more effective.
but does the phrase "no news is good news" resonate with you?
Oh God, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Because I figured, what I've told my bosses all the time, I'm going to do what you want first. I'm going to get that done.
Yeah.
So guess what? You don't have to call me to ask me if I'm on your task. I'm doing that. I'll call you when there's a problem I can't handle, or there is a resource that I need.
Okay.
And that worked great for a long time.
And that was from bottom up. What about top down? What if you weren't getting any feedback? Did it bother you?
Well, there was no occasion when I didn't, Chris, because here's why. I articulated what I wanted and when I wanted. If I didn't get it, I was calling.
Okay. Because if you weren't getting it, I mean, so you had enough self-awareness, because I take it that you're a little more extroverted than most of our general officer friends.
Yeah, a little bit more.
Yeah, you, me, and Bob Brown. I think we're the only extroverts in the entire
Yeah.
United States Officer Corps.
Yeah, Mike Garrett does pretty well.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
he's less than you.
yeah,
But I shouldn't categorize. But
yeah,
to me, it was always very interested in the Army, that because of the way we build train systems, and very
yeah,
lockstep about, we do DOT PF and all this stuff.
yeah,
They said know what the hell we're talking about, but we lived by that. People who were more introverted were very successful because they were very good at systems and
yeah.
processes and
Yes.
procedures and policies and
Yeah.
standard operating procedures and
Yeah.
but then us extroverts would kind of deviate a little bit with because it was
Yeah.
how we prefer to how to think instead of what to think.
Yes.
And
That's
we
right.
were always, yeah, and we kind of paid for that a little bit, but I got to points in time where I became so self-aware that I would actually go to someone like you, my 4-star boss,
Yeah.
even as a 2-star, and go, sir, you got to understand, no news is good news doesn't work for me. I have to have feedback. If I send you, I actually had a
Yeah.
boss who I sent 26 emails to, first 3 months in command. He never responded to any of the 26. And they were emails where I was asking for
Yeah.
feedback. I would actually put please advise because I didn't
Yeah.
think I had the authority, though I
Yeah.
was being told I had authority. So I don't think I had the authority. He never answered. So finally, when I found him and got to right in his face and said, sure, 26 emails, he goes, yeah, how's it going? I go, sir, nothing is going because I'm here to get fired.
Yeah.
I am believing that you're so upset with me that you haven't answered my emails that you're about to relieve me. He goes, no, that's good stuff. If you don't
Yeah.
hear me, that's good news. I go,
Yeah.
sir, I can't operate that way.
Yeah.
It's a need. It's not a want. It's not
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's why they call it needy, but it's a
Yeah.
need for me, for my cognitive preferences. And he's like, I can't do that. And I said, well, do me a favor. If I send you an email, look for the word, please advise, hit reply, type a period, hit send. That's all I need.
Yeah.
And it was that self-awareness for me. But what I found was
Mhm.
I had to explain that sometimes to people
Yeah.
who appear to be very extroverted and but they're really very good introverts with incredible
Yeah.
extroverted skills that
Yeah.
got them there. So
Yeah.
you cannot assume by somebody's persona what they're like. But I found the older I got, the more I had to explain that because I couldn't sit around and just assume I was doing well until randomly somebody would call me and say I was fired.
Well, I here's what I did. People probably thought I was too. I did. The higher we got up, and the more I started to get bigger organizations that I couldn't physically get to everyone all the time. I did the thing I called digital battlefield circulation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I would call guys in the middle of the night, ask Jim Mingus, ask, you name it. I would just call them randomly, whether we were in Afghanistan or they were back in home station. And what I would try to do is just have a dialogue. But that's why I published very early on my campaign plan with
Yeah.
these are when I want it. These are how we're going to do the meetings. This is who I need in the meetings. And
Yeah.
I did all that up close and personal because that's the way I took information. So
Yeah.
if you weren't giving me what I wanted, I would call you, or I might just call you just to check on you. I do that all the time because, frankly, uh, I felt that on those posts where they were the senior leaders. Now I'm talking about when I was a 3 and 4-star. My division commanders, I would call them point to point, and we would talk about things just like you and I are right here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody else in the room, just back and forth and getting ideas and bouncing. And I'd say, they'd bounce some off me and I'd say, okay, here's what I think about that. And I would say, what do you think about this? And we would agree to something and move on. And then the next week, because in my campaign design, every week I got to talk to the commanders or one of the DCGs every week from every installation.
See,
So
because
what that'll, yeah,
well, I was gonna say, because you set that tone that
yeah,
when you called, their heart didn't fall to their foot.
exactly right. They felt like, okay, this is the boss just
Just the
trying to
boss
do
checking in.
battlefield search, just what he's doing. And
Well,
I wanted them to know they weren't alone, you
yeah.
know?
See, I think with some of the bigger companies that I've worked with, they don't understand how to do that.
No, they don't.
They're kind of like, if I just leave them alone and they're producing, then that's all the motivation they need. And I go, maybe maybe it's an extremely introverted person who believes no news is good news.
Yeah.
That might be okay, but you can't, you've got to be more self-aware and socially aware of what your people need. What you were doing,
Yes.
you were being the extrovert, telling them how you wanted to do it. And that way, when it happened, it didn't surprise anybody.
That's
But
right.
if
Exactly.
you were exactly the opposite in that same command, and you aspired to no news is good news, and you thought you were empowering everybody and making everybody happy by
Yeah.
not bothering them and
Yeah.
not being perceived as a micromanager,
Yeah.
And when you call, if I, General Funk's on the phone, I just start packing the stuff out of my desk because that means I'm being relieved because
Yeah.
he never
Yeah.
calls.
That's right. That's just not the, that's just not the way I am. I just truly enjoy, and I think a leader's got to know his or her strengths and weaknesses. One of my strengths was I love to interact with folks
Yeah,
and really talk to them and figure out what they're thinking about.
yeah. And it's
I just
genuine.
enjoy that.
Yeah, you were genuine about that.
Yeah,
That's the things you were generally interested. You weren't just going down a checklist of
correct.
to ask the sergeant on the range. I
That's
think
right.
the other thing that I would encourage the audience, if you are more introverted, we're not telling you to be extroverted. We're saying is to understand you have some people in your organization
Yeah,
looking for that feedback, and vice versa. Us extroverts, you and I probably have upset a lot of people by walking down the hallway and sitting on their desk at 8 o'clock
exactly.
and asking what they did this weekend.
Why is this guy here? Yeah,
He
exactly.
is
So
completely disrupting my flow.
that's right. That's exactly right. So,
Yeah.
I used to believe I could run my cavalry squadron on the computer with 5 words: approve, disapprove, acknowledge, Wilco, and Roger. Those 5 words, I could run the whole thing. Because people would send you all these emails and stuff, and I don't, believe it or not, I do not know how to make a PowerPoint chart. I have never made one. I haven't. I'm not proud of that because sometimes people could use those, but I just never did. So, but I could certainly walk into a room and see
There's
who's.
a lot of people in Congress that don't believe that.
I know it's true. I do not know how to make one. I wouldn't even know where to start. I can make a mimeograph though. I can make a bad mimeograph. I can turn that wheel, baby.
See,
I was an S3 here.
nobody knows what we're talking about.
Right? I know.
Oh, goodness. Well, hey, so we've gotten some of your isms.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's more isms. So
Sure.
give us your top 5 isms and go slower so you can explain them.
Okay. First, I think my first one is leave your jersey in a better place every day, and that would on my list that would be, and that what that's about is just try to do your best every day. Make sure your organization knows that you didn't wake up this morning and said, "Hey, today I'm really going to screw everything up." Right?
Okay. You said leave your best jersey.
No, leave your jersey in a better place every day. You got the opportunity and the honor to wear the jersey of the United States of America, the greatest country ever, in the best military ever.
Okay.
You need to leave that jersey in a better place every day.
Okay. That makes sense.
39, leadership's contact sport. It requires daily interaction. It does. Some part of your organization needs your leadership every day. Find a way to make it. Third one would probably be catch people doing things right and then exalt them. You'll be amazed at how difficult that really is.
Yeah.
Because out there people are it's not difficult for you as the leader to see it. It's difficult for other people to hold that person up to say, hey, this person's doing it right, and we ought to emulate this.
Right.
So and frankly, when you do that in your organization, instead of tell them where they're making mistakes, if you talk about those parts of your organization that are truly making a difference, that will be powerful in your organization.
Why the word catch instead of find?
Because catch revolves on active participation.
Okay.
Find is just
You're
but
just
when you're
around,
catching,
you bump into it.
yeah,
You're going to look at something and go, I'm going to go deliberately and look at that today.
Exactly right. And then find that piece of that organization that's doing the right things and then hold it up in front of their peers and say, hey, this is kind of what I think right looks like. It's magical in your formation.
Very cool. Very cool.
I think the number one is secure yourself first. Okay. Understand the people that you have around you as a senior leader in an organization. Understand their strengths and weaknesses. Get to know their families and their friends. Get to know what makes them tick.
Okay.
And then don't put yourself in a circumstance where you are causing them to go back on their values, their norms, and their objectives. So secure yourself first, right? That's just the important thing. And then I think the fifth one is every time you think you're somebody important, try ordering around somebody else's dog. And that's about being a humble leader, right? Be a happy general, as Mike Garrett always says, but be a humble leader. People know that you're the 4-star general, right? It'll all be okay. That part, you get that power, but do they know how much you care?
Yeah.
And do you really show people that?
Excellent.
And if you really do, and they really feel that, your organization's magic. Culture matters.
Have you ever either intuitively or deliberately, based on what you just said about protecting yourself and looking at yourself in the leadership position, have you had the opportunity to go, these are my strengths and I like to do these things, these are my weaknesses and I need other to do them? Have you ever hired, based upon strengths and weaknesses, your team to surround you so you become a better entity?
Absolutely.
Tell us how you do that, or your
So
thoughts.
I looked for the talents of people that where I felt I had a weakness, but they had a strength, and that I would, and frankly, and then I tried to reward them for their performance, right? Because I knew they were going to help me. I told you I never made a PowerPoint chart in my life.
Yeah.
The number one person that I used for communication was with me for 5.5, 6 years, and she just came out below the zone, or what they call merit-based promotion. She just came out to lieutenant colonel.
Oh, good.
And I called her Words. Everybody had a nickname, right? She was Words. She did all the writing. She did all the graphic representations of what I was trying to get done. And she and I had a symbiotic relationship. Her strength was putting those words in there that mattered. And then my job was to articulate where we had decided we wanted to go. Yeah. And that was a strength. I hired a young guy named Patrick Michaelis, who now is the commandant of cadets at Texas A&M, because of his brilliant mind. That guy is the best strategic planner I've ever seen. He understands how to do this. He put the plan. Ultimately, what happened in 14 all the way to 20 in the ISIS fight, Pat Michaelis started in 2014.
Wow.
Yeah. And if you go to the enlisted side of the house, I like to believe that I'm the guy that found Tony Grinston. He was on his 2nd brigade as a brigade command sergeant major. I called him because my aide didn't know how to do the time conversion. So I got him out of bed at 3:00 in the morning in the middle of Afghanistan as I was getting ready to select the next sergeant major of the 1st Infantry Division. I got him out of bed at 3:00 in the morning to go over my, I told you my campaign plan and all my vision for how the organization was going to operate. And that guy at 3:00 in the morning, after he'd just come off a big patrol and everything else, could articulate and tell me how he was going to apply what it is I was talking about as the division sergeant major at 3 in the morning. He'd had the slides for a week and he had been in combat that whole time.
Yeah.
Yet he had taken the time to look at this, do these things. And he later became the great command sergeant major of the Army, Tony Grinston.
That's right.
That's how I picked that. But that's how I picked him, because he could back up what I wanted the vision of the organization to be. He could put practical applications and accountability steps along the way for everybody in the organization. It was a magnificent measurement. But yes, I always did that. Always did that, Chris. You don't want a bunch of people like yourself. It's fun, but you ain't getting nothing done.
Well, and I think that takes a tremendous amount of self-awareness.
Yeah.
And you've got to be humble and vulnerable to say, look, I don't, as we grew up in the Army, they made us learn how to do everything.
Yes.
It doesn't mean we like to do all those
things.
And we got to the top because we got good at all those things.
Yes.
But the thing is, I didn't like to do this stuff, But you know, I would meet younger men and women. I would watch them, and I would
Yeah.
go, "Boy, he really likes." I mean,
Yes.
he gets a thrill out of doing something I hate. So
Yes.
here's my intent. Here's my why. Here's my left and right limit.
Yep.
Now, and give him what he needed to understand. Then
Yes.
let him go. And then when
It's
they
the
come back,
secret to leader development in your organization. It
oh
really is, especially in these large organizations. If you're not developing your leaders to first find their strengths and weaknesses and then help them build on them, you're not
yeah,
doing it right. You're just not. Whatever large organization, whether it be the military or whatever, you're just not
I'm sure
developing the organization effectively.
I am sure that like myself, when somebody came in and I got the breed ahead and there were 78 slides, the kid would get up in front of me and I read them because that's what we do. And the kid's getting ready to brief me 78 slides for an hour and a half. And I go, I read your slides. Incredible. You did everything I asked you to do. I can make a decision right now,
Yep.
or you can brief me on these 78 slides because I want you to get full credit. But right now, I'm telling you, this is awesome. What would you like to do, Major? And it was
Yes.
amazing. You know, about half the time they would go, can I have a decision? Go, yeah, approved.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well done.
Let's go.
And it's all in
Exactly.
an hour and a half back. But some of those
Yep.
young kids, because I respected them, I would say, give me the brief.
Have at it. Yeah.
Take the whole 178 slides because I wanted them to feel successful.
Yeah.
And then it was
Yeah.
a mentoring session about an hour later. Go, you know, we could have been to the gym by now.
Exactly.
He wanted to show me he could do it. So,
Yep. That's right.
but I think that's the vulnerable leadership piece, the servant leadership piece.
Yeah.
But you know what would bother me though is somebody would demand read ahead slides and then not read them.
I know.
You know, it's like I did
Yeah.
that a few times as a briefer. Sure, according to the slides, I think we should just go ahead and jump to slide 29. And well, I didn't read the brief. Oh, okay. Well, you know, I'm not going to bust my butt next time getting you the read ahead slides. So,
Yeah, that's right.
but I never said that, but I sure thought it.
Yeah, of course.
Boss, anything you want to add to the audience here at the end? And
Hey,
we do have
thanks for
cool,
doing this. I really appreciate that. Leadership is a contact sport. There is no if, ands, or buts about it. It is. And, you got to be invested in your people, in my opinion. And I think if all of us spend a little bit more time investing in the people, the world would be a better place.
Absolutely.